1 week ago, on the morning of Wednesday, December 4th, a masked and hooded man executed healthcare CEO Brian Thompson in the front of the Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan.
According to Fox News, the United Healthcare CEO has been fatally shot. Again, this all happening in Midtown Manhattan.
The gunman immediately fled the scene, seemingly disappearing into Central Park. And over the next several days, a nationwide manhunt began as law enforcement pleaded with the public to help them in their efforts to apprehend the would-be assassin. However, the public's response to that plea was not at all what law enforcement was expecting. Within hours, countless people began sharing their sentiments surrounding their own personal experiences with United Healthcare, demonstrating how many within the general public felt about the CEO of one of the wealthiest healthcare conglomerates in the world. But just 5 days after the manhunt began, Luigi Nicholas Mangione was seen and recognized by an employee at a local McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Mangione would eventually be approached by law enforcement, interviewed, and ultimately arrested for the homicide of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. In today's episode, we will look at the case of Luigi Mangione, evaluating the information that has arisen surrounding his life, as well as analyze the history of the healthcare industry at large while trying to answer the question, was this nothing more than an avoidable and unnecessary homicide? Or has this become the final catalyst for change? This is the case of Luigi Mangione, a Behind Criminal Minds expose. On November 24th of last month, the primary suspect was seen having arrived in New York City by Greyhound bus from the Atlanta, Georgia area. Records show that he checked in to an Upper West Side Manhattan hostel on the same day with a New Jersey fake ID, paying the attendant in cash. The suspect was scheduled to stay for a total of 10 days. However, records show that he checked out early, leaving the hostel on the 3rd of December. Around that same time, CEO Brian Thompson had arrived in New York for an important annual investors meeting that would occur the morning of December 4th. Thompson's wife Paulette would later speak to the media to explain that her husband, the chief executive officer of United Healthcare, had been receiving threats to his life in the weeks and months preceding. United Healthcare is the single largest healthcare provider in the United States, while boasting $371 billion in revenue in 2023 alone. However, over the last few years, the healthcare behemoth has come under fire for their business practices that have begun to garner the attention of Congress. In October of 2024, a Senate subcommittee named United Healthcare and other major insurers in a report that directly criticized the company's sharp increase of Medicare coverage denials. In fact, under Thompson's guidance, United Healthcare began using AI to automate claims, which would result in denials nearly double the previous rate. In response to this new AI system, a class action was filed against United Healthcare in November of 2023, which alleged that the AI model had a 90% error rate. But scandals seemed to be a reoccurring problem for the CEO when he and fellow executives of United Healthcare sold $100 million in stocks less than 2 weeks before news of a federal antitrust probe went public. Credible claims of insider trading were leveled against the CEO, and as a result, the Department of Justice began an investigation against Brian Thompson for a crime that could have landed him in federal prison. But all of that scrutiny was about to come to a head the morning of December 4th, 2024. On Wednesday, December 4th, the man who would become the primary suspect surrounding this case was captured on CCTV, leaving his hostel around 5:30 a.m. 45 minutes later, the masked man can be seen leaving the 57th Street F train. 2 minutes later, at 6:17 a.m., he is seen buying coffee, water, and granola at a local Starbucks just 2 blocks away from the New York Hilton in Midtown Manhattan. Moments later, cameras catch him discarding his coffee cup, which would be recovered by law enforcement for DNA testing. Surveillance footage captures the suspect again at 6:30 a.m. talking on his cell phone, and just 9 minutes later, he is seen arriving at the New York Hilton Midtown Hotel, where he then proceeds to wait. At 6:40 a.m., Brian Thompson is leaving the Marriott Hotel where he had stayed the night prior. He is now beginning to walk toward the Midtown Hilton Hotel. At 6:44 a.m., CEO Brian Thompson walks onto the sidewalk in the direction of the Hilton Hotel when the assailant draws his weapon. Brian Thompson would sustain what would ultimately become fatal injuries. By 6:46 a.m., police responded to a 911 call that reported a man outside of the Midtown Hilton who had been grievously wounded by gunfire. First responders arrived at the scene 2 minutes later, and just after 6:48 a.m., Brian Thompson was quickly assessed and then rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital. At the exact same time, CCTV would catch the suspect riding an e-bike northbound away from the scene of the crime into Central Park. 11 minutes later, cameras catch the suspect riding the same e-bike on West 85th Street. And just after 7:04 a.m., the suspect is again seen by surveillance getting into a northbound taxi on 86th Street in Amsterdam en route to the George Washington Bridge bus station, the same station where he would board a departing bus around 7:30 a.m. that same morning, leaving the city of Manhattan. United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was pronounced deceased at Mount Sinai Hospital at 7:12 a.m. Since the morning of December 4th, the 24-hour news media cycle has rigorously tracked the manhunt for the person responsible for the homicide of Brian Thompson. For 5 days, it appeared that the assailant may have succeeded in avoiding detection, with speculation for his motives running rampant. But on the morning of December 9th, the Altoona, Pennsylvania Police Department would receive a 911 call from a local McDonald's that the person who law enforcement was looking for was sitting in their establishment. Altoona, Pennsylvania is 280 miles away from Manhattan, so when responding officers arrived at the scene, they quickly approached the suspect, initially being provided with a fake ID. The same fake ID that was presented to the New York hostel linked to the person of interest surrounding this very crime. Eventually, Altoona PD placed Luigi Nicholas Mangione into custody and began searching through his belongings. In his backpack, they located a 3D printed weapon that has since been tested for ballistics and is a match to the weapon used at the scene of the crime. They would also find a 3D printed suppressor and a 3-page handwritten manifesto decrying the ills of the American healthcare system. Luigi was initially charged with a variety of lesser offenses, but by the end of that same day, he would be arraigned and charged with second-degree homicide, as well as 3 counts of illegal weapon possession and forgery. He is expected to plead not guilty, which is the common plea of every defendant, regardless of the merits of the case against them. However, if Luigi is convicted of the higher offenses, he faces a possible sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole in 20 years. But the question that everyone wants to know is, who is Luigi Mangione and how did he arrive here? News reports have revealed that Luigi grew up in a wealthy and well-respected family in Baltimore, Maryland. Growing up, Luigi was an athlete, and eventually he earned the title of valedictorian from his prestigious high school, Gilman Prep, where the tuition will cost you nearly $40,000 annually. After graduating high school, Luigi would attend the University of Pennsylvania, where he would join a fraternity and eventually earned his Bachelor of Science in Engineering with a concentration in AI, but he didn't stop there. He continued his education at UPenn, and in 2020, he received a master's degree in engineering. After college, Luigi moved to Hawaii for a time and eventually began working his way up the corporate ladder, working as a data engineer at TrueCar, a Santa Monica, California-based corporation. Luigi's life was one of privilege, a life that was afforded to him by his grandfather, Nicholas Mangione. His grandfather Nicholas was a multi-billion-dollar real estate developer, the descendant of 19th century Italian immigrants. Despite growing up in poverty, Luigi's grandfather would go on to create an empire of successful businesses, including country clubs, nursing homes, and even a radio station, all while supporting local charities and philanthropic organizations. The Mangione family is well known in the Baltimore area, and it's why Luigi eventually left Hawaii and moved to Japan. But sometime before he left Hawaii, Luigi would suffer a surfing injury that resulted in a devastating spine condition that eventually required surgical intervention. Luigi underwent a lumbar spine fusion, the experience becoming just part of the puzzle that would go on to explain his true motivations. In the days since his arrest, people who were once close to Luigi have come forward to explain that he was a kind, generous, and magnanimous person who only recently had begun to withdraw from his friends and family members over the prior 6 months. But in all of the interviews of people who knew him, none saw any signs that Luigi was capable of planning the crime that he is now being charged with. However, despite all of this, it's the conversation that has come from this crime that has opened up a dialogue about the state of our healthcare system at large. Without opening Google, how much money do you think the United States healthcare system spent in the year 2023? If I was asked that question, I would venture a guess that maybe we're nearly $500 million. In my wildest dreams, maybe $1 trillion at worst. But even as I say the word trillion, it sounds absurd, but it doesn't even get you close to the correct answer. $4.8 trillion is an incomprehensibly massive amount of money. And in the great US of A, it places us at the very top of how much is spent by every other country in the entire world. So if we are outspending every other first world country, then surely we should have the best healthcare in the world, right? Otherwise, what does that massive price tag buy us when we compare ourselves to the quality of healthcare found literally everywhere else? Is anyone surprised that we place dead last in access to care, dead last in the process of obtaining that care, and last in the overall health outcomes of the care that is received? And yet that isn't even close to the only problem, because we also rank worst when measured against those same countries for infant mortality, life expectancy, unmanaged diabetes, and the list goes on and on. But figures and numbers are hard to conceptualize, so I want you to hear from a few of the real stories from people living within the U.S. who are dealing with the American healthcare system today, because this is what $5 trillion buys us annually. Just 3 years ago, a young woman with type 1 diabetes and a chronic history of asthma was denied her life-saving medications submitted by the pharmacy to United Healthcare. As a result of their denial, she was forced to pay the cash price, which she could not afford. Just 3 days after submitting her appeal to United Healthcare, she passed away from respiratory arrest. A man was rushed to the hospital after demonstrating symptoms of a stroke. Upon arriving to the hospital, he was assessed, admitted, and treated for that stroke. After being discharged, the man received a letter from his insurance company informing him that they had denied the claim. Their reason for the denial was that they had determined that his treatment at the hospital was not medically necessary. Recently, a young mother was diagnosed with a severe case of MS. Her neurologist informed her that she needed to begin taking a new medication due to the concerning levels of brain atrophy that were now showing up on her scans. The new life-saving medication was denied by the insurance company due to the fact that her scans did not show enough new damage to her brain. A middle-aged man was diagnosed with a rare but treatable form of cancer. a cancer that required a PET scan in order to begin targeted radiotherapy. The insurance company initially denied the claim on the basis that he had not received a liver biopsy. After proving that he had in fact already undergone a liver biopsy, the insurance company issued a second denial, claiming that the ordered PET scans were not medically necessary. This was despite the fact that his oncologist could not begin cancer treatment until the PET scan testing was complete. During this period of time, while the insurance company continued to deny the claims, the man's cancer spread, and within 6 months, he passed away. Finally, a 35-year-old man with an extensive history of cervical spine herniation was told by his spine surgeon that he needed a multi-level fusion to prevent catastrophic injury that was likely to cause severe paralysis. The insurance company denied the claim for nearly a year before finally agreeing to approve just half of the total procedure that was needed. During the surgery, the surgeon would go on to complete the entire procedure, believing that the insurance company would change their mind due to the overwhelming evidence that this was medically necessary. 6 weeks later, the man received the insurance company's post-surgical denial, leaving him with an adjusted bill of $130,000. Every single story that you have just heard are from real people living within the hellscape of the American healthcare for-profit industry. And that last story you heard was my own. 7 years later, and I am still paying for that surgery. The number one reason for filing bankruptcy in the United States of America is due to medical debt. We can all agree that committing a homicide is not the most effective way to communicate your grievances. And yet at the same time, while we deplore violence, we have to be willing to ask what caused it and why. Because there are now hundreds upon thousands of people who have witnessed personally the life of someone they know and love who's had their life ended early because insurance companies in the United States place profit above everything else. At the scene of the crime, law enforcement found bullet casings with the words deny, defend, and depose written on each. These words refer to the stance of insurance companies like United Healthcare who choose litigation in defense of their shareholders to continue a culture of denying claims, defending their choice to do so, and conducting litigation to force you, the claimant, into depositions to prove your own injuries for the premiums paid on a claim that isn't worth the paper it was printed on. For over a decade of my life, I worked on behalf of the plaintiffs who filed the bad faith lawsuits against the insurance companies who routinely have developed a policy of denying claims and forcing you, the insured, to endure years of litigation at the expense of your sanity, your time, and even worse, your health. Luigi Mangione is going to have his day in court, and when that time comes, this channel will take the time to analyze his trial in great detail. But whether we like it or not, he has touched a nerve within the American public about the dire conditions of our healthcare system because he is forcing us to ask the question, why? Why are we outspending every other country in the world on healthcare? Why did we pay almost $5 trillion for that healthcare last year alone? And why did we receive virtually nothing for that expense? I will leave you with these final words from the author and publisher of the Substack page, The Ink.
The reality in this country is if you kill people with a gun, it is very obvious to everybody what's going on, and you're rightly deplored. And we should deplore that. If it is a more systemic kind of killing, as your social media person was saying, if people are being killed through PDF files and through claim denial letters and through a deliberate practice of saying no to a certain form of care that you know you're going to end up granting, but if you say no, 80% of people will lose steam and not appeal successfully, and you'll only have to give it to 20% of those people, and you factor that into your balance sheet. And if that is not an incidental thing that happens or bad apples, that's actually how you make money, because the health insurance industry is an industry that doesn't really exist in many other countries because they just take care of each other as part of the society. You cannot expect to live in a society in which that rage goes nowhere, just fizzles out and dissipates. And we have to deplore violence and then be curious about where it's coming from.
The arrest of Luigi Mangione is just the beginning of what is already becoming one of the most contentious and consequential cases in recent years. The attention that this case has brought to the fragmented healthcare system in the U.S. is long overdue. And while we may not all see eye to eye concerning the outcome of this case, one thing is certain. The American healthcare system must radically change because it is long overdue. In closing, I want to take a moment to just thank you for listening to what is now the shortest video I have ever made on this channel. I also want to take a moment to welcome all of the new subscribers to the channel. Over 10,000 of you have joined in just the last few weeks alone, and I want you to know that you are welcome in this community. The BCM family has continued to grow in ways that I never expected was possible, and I am just so thankful for your time, your support, and your encouragement. Also, I want to thank the producers of this channel. Each of you are appreciated immensely, and I also want to thank Just Jules and Crime and Crochet for your assistance with the research of this episode. Thank you both so much for all you do. Next week, we will be returning to the Deep Dive series, and we will also be covering new cases, including Sarah Boone, the Delphi murders, Brian Koberger, and those are just to name a few. I am truly so blessed this holiday season to have people like you in this community. But please, before you go today, take a moment to reach out to someone you love, someone you know, or even someone you work with. This is a very hard time of year for so many people, and it's never too late to reach out and remind those people that they matter and that you haven't forgotten them. Stay tuned for community updates on new content coming soon, and I really look forward to seeing you back here next week. So as always, this has been Behind Criminal Minds. We'll see you next time.